Marvelous!
Post-Vietnam Iron Man is very much about, like, Tony Stark facing the consequences of his actions. And I really like that they kind of set this up in the movies. It also kind of goes into the mental toll that all of his actions kind of take on him. We're going to get more into that into, like, Iron Man 3, but they do set this up pretty well in this movie, too. Do you think they could make a character like Tony Stark ever again?
Well, the thing is, people, they don't really remember too much about the first movies. I think they could, honestly. But it would have to be, like, something very different, something to distinguish them.
That's not exactly what I'm referring to.
Oh, you mean like the same character, like, as an overall...
There is... Okay. I wanted to try and not, like, get into politics this video. But I'm sure you're aware the world has changed somewhat.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that you could do back then that you really just can't do now.
Oh, that's what you meant.
Yes. And I remember watching this movie like, damn, you really just can't make this character today, huh? It makes for some interesting growth for the character, for sure.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking like, man, this Tony Stark would have been a hashtag on Twitter. He would have been part of the Me Too, or, like, held up as one of the villains of Me Too. This Tony, I love him, first off. I think the fact that he's such an asshole. He's a giant asshole. And that makes for some, like, very interesting character growth. But do you think they could ever make a character like this again?
Not in the current stage.
Okay.
I've seen characters in the past like this.
Well, yeah, but that's
like,
past.
but like in a video game called the Tales of series.
Okay.
And it's a struggle just to get along with this character in the beginning, and he's like the main character.
Oh, okay.
But then you realize what the plot is and how he changes, and then he gets a little better.
Alright. Oh, kind of like Iron Man. Well, Iron Man's kind of... You still kind of like Tony Stark at the beginning, though.
You do not like this character at the beginning.
Alright.
You will not like him in the beginning. You have to watch him grow and make really big mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Alright. I don't want to spend too much time on it. There are some Mandarin references in here, but I forgot to write them down. Mandarin is, like, of the villains of Iron Man, one of, like, the biggest villains, although he is a bit fantastical. We'll probably get more into that when we get into Shang-Chi, actually. And I do like that they, like I said, the first third of Iron Man is basically Tales of Suspense 39, but expanded and somewhat modernized. I'm curious, like, what it would have looked like if they did decide to stick one-to-one with, like, it being well, no, they can't really do that, can they?
No, not anymore. That proposes legal troubles.
Yeah.
And really a lot of troubles because of what it is today.
I wrote, and on my notes I have that Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D. is in here. I forgot exactly why that's important, though.
Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D. is a character in the comics, I think, too. He's in everything.
This movie makes a focus on actually showing how the tech works. Something kind of missing from the later movies, but they actually show, like, this suit is very unoptimized. If you notice, he has to, like, stand there and wait for the suit to be built on top of him. It's actually not as good at flying as some of the other suits. Speaking of flying, so I keep hearing that they didn't plan to make an MCU with this first movie. But looking at, like, all the things in this movie, I can't imagine...
They didn't plan it.
But, like, looking at... Because, like, that first flight where he flies up all the way up and he gets, like, ice all over him.
Yeah.
And his suit kind of, like, malfunctions. That happens twice in the MCU, I believe?
I don't remember those, but that's possible.
It is... Like, his themes are, like, PTSD. They make a, like, casual reference to him having PTSD, which then eventually later becomes him actually having PTSD.
Yeah.
Other than that, I'm not sure how I feel about Ironmonger.
He fits the story, I guess.
He does. It's something I've kind of had like a problem with in these Iron Man movies. Actually, is that the villains are just not that memorable,
No.
which is strange. Oh well. Other than that, this movie is actually still kind of hype. It's an above average movie. The montage scene in particular still got me like actually hype. The montage of him like working the suit out and before he flies, suit fitting, all that. Oh, and I do like how much characterization they give to not just Jarvis, but that other. I think it has a name, but fire extinguisher bot.
All right.
Like that, just that one arm.
That's so much personality.
Yes.
I like. All I'm going to here for Iron Man 3 literally has him collecting it again.
Yeah.
I wish we saw more of it.
Yeah, that bot is the best. If you want to go into your thoughts on Iron Man 2, though.
That's in a place where I just thought it was weird a little bit at the beginning.
Mm.
But other than that, and the main villain has a little bit of a session with Tony Stark, because we get to see him right away. I didn't understand everything, but he was like, it should be you up there. I like how they immediately established Iron Man still has a huge ego. And literally, like, the expose, I'm like, wow, this screams, you have an ego. And this is like 6 months later. You can change, like, some things, but some things are, you have to work on. I don't think he's working on it. He is bigger celebrity now than ever. I like how they actually make, for the first Iron Man movie, they actually make Iron Man go up to, like, the biggest law of the land about it and stuff. And then but I think there would be more consequences of him showing on the U.S., like, Congress state, like, other armor suits were supposed to be classified. But other than that, like, it did show them up a little bit, and I would be outraged. So I guess So I don't know how that would turn out, honestly. Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodes had to testify, what was Tony Stark's friend from the first movie. Which I found interesting, that he couldn't say it very much, and he did represent, like, they only say these things, don't say anything else. People try. The ending of the trial I thought was not very realistic, because I think there would be bigger consequences than Tony Stark just...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Tony Stark just is reckless, like, how because he's dying in this part in the movie.
Yes.
So, like, being like, he's dying now. I'm like, oh. That's going to be a plot. And how he handles it is not very good. He did make CEO of Pepper CEO of Stark Industries. So it's like, oh, he does care. Too bad he's acting like a jerk still. I think he's trying to live his best life before he dies. I'm like, dude, tell them. I was very annoyed. The race car driver scene I was very interested in. Like, they're randomly taking a race car. The literal attack of the whip guy, I was like, ooh, now maybe we'll learn more about his past and learn a little bit more. We did learn a little bit more, but not enough, I don't think. People say he's drunk with power after that. Like, about, like, he's drunk with power. I'm like, that's what they think at first, and that's what led to his friend, Colonel Rhodes, yeah, taking one of Iron Man's suits. Which I'm surprised Tony Stark ever never took back.
I'm surprised he was able to get it in the first place, actually.
Yeah, I know. The Iron Man suit's laser beams hitting each other was one of the coolest scenes in the movie. And they did it twice, so. Nick Fury's scene with Tony and, like, curing him, and, like, all Nick Fury scenes with Black Widow were just cool. And, like, curing him with, like, temporarily stopping the thing was killing him. I didn't remember anything about Tony Stark discovering a new element, like, at all. There's another element in this universe. That's basically my reaction. I like how immediately Tony Stark gets Lieutenant Colonel Rhodes. Took over by the company which he was working with Evans, and then the weapon which he was like hyping up as a big thing did nothing. Yeah. Pepper and Tony finally kiss eventually in this movie, which is like, okay, I'll give him that. It's the end of the movie. And then the Black Widow scene of her actually fighting. I didn't see Black Widow fight before Black Widow much. And like other shows, like in crossover movies, I didn't know much about Black Widow. And that's probably all the machines, robots coming together and fighting and everything was interesting. The final fight was just, I felt it went a little weak at the end, but other than that, it was okay. What did you think?
So, watching this movie in hindsight is very interesting. I don't know how much you have you seen Captain America?
No.
Okay. There's so many things about that movie that are going to be very familiar having watched this movie.
Okay.
Anyone who's seen Captain America probably knows exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're like kind of lost, that entire intro it reeks of Captain America. They basically made Tony Stark the new Captain America, since I think at this point in time he's still in the ice. So in the comics, it's Tony Stark is typically doesn't announce that he's Iron Man. So everything in this movie is something that probably wouldn't happen in the comics, which is interesting. He has become Ego Man. Very ego. And he's also very quick turnaround from the last movie. So last movie he wanted to, stop producing weapons. Now he's talking about saving the world as Iron Man.
Yeah.
He became, as he put it, I forgot exactly how he put it, but he essentially democratized world
peace.
Yeah.
I have monopolized world peace.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was like, he got very egoistic. I think it was because he was dying and he was really.
Yes. So essentially, he finds out that he is dying, and as such, he makes a lot of rash actions. He makes Pepper Potts the new CEO. The Avengers are technically kind of assembling at this moment. Black Widow gets introduced. I think they make a reference to... No, that is not what I'm thinking of. I thought they made a reference to Hawkeye. I think I'm thinking of another movie.
Yeah, and Black Widow is kind of a spy too.
Yes.
In Tony Stark's business.
Yes. What an interesting... Seeing her in the comics as a Cold War villain, now turned into in Tony Stark's office, is such a flip.
And then she's like, I'm spying on you. And he's really pressed. You're really good at this. And basically, I can call Fury in a second to dispatch you. Because that's Tony Stark. And Black Widow does not want to mess around with him.
Elon Musk is in the MCU.
Yes.
He is in the MCU. Oh, and I think there's actually a lot of real world references in these movies.
Yeah.
Mad Money guy, things like Bill Mayer, the guy who's notoriously skeptical about every new thing.
Yeah.
I think Oprah makes an appearance at some point.
It's just interesting how many real world references are there.
Yeah, I'm kind of digging it though. It's because these movies are supposed to be taking place in real time. The events of, they refer to it as the events of, I think 2006 or something.
Yeah.
Implying that these are actually taking place in real time. So it is kind of nice that they actually tie it to the real world that we actually live in.
Which is interesting.
I really like how, like I said about Iron Man 1, I really like how they emphasize the suit and its technology.
Yeah.
It's always fascinating to see how the suits transport over time. So in this one, it's a lot more mobile. It's now a suitcase that you deploy on the ground and you step into, and it builds a suit around them. Whereas before, you needed an entire team of machines
just to build it.
Yeah.
And I really like the third one at the end.
Birth of War Machine is also interesting.
Yeah.
Not like War Machine proper, but the Rhodes deciding that, you know what, this is enough. Which is... I read something about this in the comics. He doesn't don the suit as, because of the action of Tony, but it is something that Tony does that causes him to get the suit on.
Yep.
Through Discord, I asked you a question.
Yes.
I, unfortunately, have decided to rescind that question.
Oh.
Due to further research.
Okay.
So, watching Iron Man 2, I had this, there was this feeling at the back of my mind that I couldn't quite put my finger on until Nick Fury showed up.
Yeah.
And that feeling was, I've been watching an anti-hero this entire time. I think Nick Fury is the reason why. Because typically with an anti-hero, they're very not heroic. Typically, they become the hero due to circumstance, not because they're very, not because they're trying to do the right thing, but because they're like trying to fix like a mistake they made, or they're just at the wrong place at the wrong time. They typically don't want to be the hero. They also typically have some sort of comeuppance, or like their flaws, they get exposed for their flaws, or something happens to them that completely humiliates them, and they get their just desserts. Nick Fury is that character. Good lord. When Nick Fury showed up on screen, it essentially told him what it was. I was yelling at the screen like, yo, talk to him.
I like how he knew it. I like he knew everything was going on.
Yo, put this man on the news.
Just tell the truth.
Yeah, he got put in his place. The back and forth is amazing.
Unfortunately, my volume was messing up during that moment.
Unfortunate.
So I couldn't really hear it, but I knew he was telling him some truth.
Yeah.
So my volume was like really glitching out during that moment. So
also following that is Tony Stark is in the process of losing everything. So he's lost Pepper.
Yeah.
He's kind of under house arrest, but not really. Yeah. He's lost his company.
Yeah.
He's lost public perception due to the events of that night, or when he got drunk.
Yeah.
He's losing he's getting his comeuppance. And it's satisfying to watch. Which is not something that I should be saying for the hero of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought initially, maybe this guy's been an anti-hero this entire time. Further research, nah, not really.
Not really.
There's a few things that disqualify him. Also, per how Iron Man is created, he is supposed to be very different from like all the other heroes at the time. He is not something that the average comic reader would have wanted, but he has those few things that make people like him. Also, he is Iron Man 1, kind of heroic. He decides, granted he gets captured and he sees that his weapons are being used by terrorists to enact things that he would essentially be stopping with his weapons.
Yeah.
You realize, all right, maybe this is enough. It's heroic enough, I think, to disqualify him. Although, I think there is still an argument to make. Maybe at the beginning of this movie, he's an anti-hero. So I'm sorry, you probably have like some notes written down for it, but
I'm just gonna skip ahead.
This movie has by far some of the worst explained science shit in history, though. So you touched on it before, the new element. Typically, they try and I've seen some better explanations for this new technology they pulled out of their ass.
Yeah.
This is by far the worst explained. I have no idea
how they got past.
Yeah. Seeing like War Machine proper is also I really liked. I just like his design, I guess.
Yeah. They were going to make a series about him after like this MCU thing. But I don't think they ever got to it. So I don't know what caused it, but
Oh, also I find it interesting they replaced the actor.
Oh, right.
Because he was a much lighter black dude in the first Iron Man. I heard like some contracts got like kind of screwy, which is why I think his name is Don Cheadle replaces the other guy.
Yeah, they don't replace some people now easily. But I feel like if contracts go screwy, I think you should maybe no.
I think the original guy got screwed in the contracts, which is why he got replaced or something like that.
I don't know. I would have to look more into it.
I would also have to look into it more. I'm not going to claim to know much about this. The last thing I have written down, though. So what do you think of that ending? Elaborate more on what you thought of the ending fight climax thing.
Well, he literally just tries to kill Pepper at the end, and I felt like it was like retreading the same ground, basically. But instead of reversing it, like Tony has to say Pepper instead of Tony relying on Pepper to do it. So I felt like they were just reversing it, honestly. But other than that, most of it was unique.
Of the Iron Man villains, I think... damn, I wish I remembered his name. The Russian dude is the most interesting. especially in the way he fights. I would love to see more of him like fighting Iron Man. Although it does feel a bit one-sided at times.
Yeah, because Iron Man has no idea who he is.
Well, that and like his powers just they don't completely shut down Iron Man, but they're very effective at stopping Iron Man, the suit in particular.
Those whips are.
But other than that, fighting in this movie is weird. Yeah. Especially that like very end after the robots show up and they go haywire. So the point of Tony flying around was
because of the bombs.
Yeah, he's trying to like save as many lives as possible, get people out of harm's way, which is why he decides to fly directly underneath the bridge through like a busy bridge too. It's not like an empty bridge where a bunch of people are driving to take his fight there. He flies into the crowd in an effort to save civilians.
Yeah, I think this just shows like Tony's recklessness. Because in the comics, I know he is very reckless.
It's whack. That's the only word I have to describe it. It's whack. And then, also, before I move on, so like I mentioned in the beginning, don't remember much about these movies. I remember a little bit about Iron Man 1 before I'd watched it, and even when I watched Iron Man 3 initially, I remembered a few things about it. At least when I started watching it, things came back to me. Nothing. I'm convinced that I've never seen this movie before. Thoroughly convinced. There's nothing about this movie. Not one aspect or anything about it that comes back to me at all. Nothing at all.